Well, hello and welcome to the Adobe Abode. My name is Callie, and on this channel I do mostly Bible-related junk journaling. Well, the new year is coming, and that gets us all to thinking a little bit about our fresh Bible study plans and what we're going to be doing. I like to study things kind of book by book, and so the question I want to answer in today's video is, what's the best way to start off on the right foot in a particular book of the Bible? We know that understanding context in our Bible study is one of the most important elements of our efforts. So let me show you how I do a book background. One of the things we want to do as we study is we want to zoom in and zoom out all throughout our study so that we're getting really the granular information we're looking for, but then we're also backing out to make sure that what we're interpreting and what we're seeing actually fits with the whole story, with the meta-narrative of Scripture. And so today what we're doing is we're looking at overall context in the book of Matthew, and I've added into my Bible, this is an interleaved Bible, I've added into it this little sort of like introduction sheet that I made. This will give me information to reference later. But even just the making of this little sheet is a learning process for me. And so I wanted to share this with you. Hopefully you can apply something that you learn here to your own Bible study. Now, if you've ever seen the Bible Project videos, they have a video for each book of the Bible, and it's kind of like around 5 minutes. It's a beautiful animation that they do. And they give you this sort of overview of each book of the Bible. Well, that's kind of what I'm doing with this sheet. Of course, my animation isn't as good and fancy, but the idea is I'm getting a snapshot, an overview, a flyover of the book and answering certain questions. Well, what information are we looking for here? Well, we're looking for context information that's going to help us understand the big picture as we study this particular book. We're kind of looking to answer questions that are kind of the who, what, where, when, how, why kind of questions. So what I'm going to do now is I'll zoom you in and take you through these notes so you can get an idea of the kind of information that I would add as a background. I'm doing background research, understanding the book of Matthew, not just the context of what's in the text, not yet. What I'm really doing is about the book itself. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so what I have here is Introduction to Matthew, and then I have my sources listed here. I have my ESV Study Bible, Cultural Background Study Bible, and my Richard's Bible Handbook. And I've got these color-coded so that my notes on this sheet, I know where they came from. So if I want to go back and look, I can see that again. So the first thing I'm looking at is authorship and date. So this is who wrote it and when. I have from the ESV Study Bible, the earliest traditions of the church unanimously attribute the first gospel to Matthew. Papias mentions it in 135 AD and Irenaeus in 175 AD. Irenaeus asserts that Matthew composed this gospel while Peter and Paul were still living, which is pretty amazing. My ESV Study Bible has the source for that as Against Heresies. And this would date this book to the late 50s or early 60s AD, which is pretty early. That's pretty amazing. I didn't know it was dated that early. But then also in the Cultural Background Study Bible, there was something slightly different, and I thought I would take note of it. It said others argue, kind of had the same sort of information, but then it said others argue that Matthew was written in the 70s AD because of Matthew's emphasis on Jesus' foretelling of the destruction of the temple. Well, the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and what this is saying is that it's possible that Matthew was written after that because Matthew makes it a point to say Jesus foretold this happening and then it happened. And so that's a possibility. We don't know exactly, but that's a pretty good range. The 50s to the 70s, that's only 20 years. That's not much. And so that's a pretty interesting range, and then a pretty early attribution. Good information, I thought, on authorship and date from those sources that I have. Then we have answering the question, who was it written to? Who was the intended audience? So we have a possible intended audience here. Scholars suggest that the church in Antioch in Syria, Jews and Gentiles, was the intended audience, as evidenced by its strong influence on Ignatius, early bishop of Antioch, but it appears to have circulated widely and rapidly. That's according to my ESV study Bible. And then the cultural backgrounds has Matthew is a favorite and most quoted gospel of the 2nd century church. So that's interesting. Okay, so now we're talking about purpose. The Richard's Bible Handbook said something that I thought was striking, which is that Matthew's Gospel was a major literary undertaking. I think sometimes we think of the Bible as sort of being this primitive document, and that's not true at all. They actually were quite capable, literarily speaking. And so I wanted to make a note of that. And then the ESV study Bible under purpose kind of had this to say. It says, Matthew crafted his account to demonstrate, and then it has 3 points, that Jesus' messianic identity, his inheritance of Davidic kingship, and the fulfillment of the promise to Abraham to be a blessing to all nations. And then over here in stylistic features, we have kind of more of the same type of information. Recurrent quotation and citation of the Old Testament. Emphasis on Jesus being kingly or royal. It has Jesus' legal genealogy. In the book of Luke, it's Mary's genealogy, which is actually his blood genealogy. But in Matthew, you have his legal genealogy going from Joseph to David and showing that lineage to David. And then phrases that are used over and over in the book of Matthew in a distinct way. Son of David, as the prophet said, and the kingdom of heaven. These are all factors that really point to the idea that Matthew was writing primarily to the Jews. He wanted to show that Jesus was the fulfillment of what the Jews already believed about God. Here I just have some other notes about where I might go in the future to look. So like in my ESV study Bible, go look at the charts for in the intro that have to do with timeline and themes. And then in the Richard's, the Old Testament verse outline and the in-text notes are copious. I just wanted to make a note of that. And then on the back side of the sheet, I have a very interesting literary feature that is talked about in a few of the sources that I have. And I wanted to make sure that I get this down because this is important as for the whole context of the book. In my ESV study Bible, it mentions this rhythmic back and forth between blocks of narrative and discourse. There's 5 passages of discourse, in other words, Jesus speaking, in which Jesus answers 5 questions. The first one, how are citizens of the kingdom to live, in chapters 5 through 7. How are traveling disciples to conduct themselves, in chapter 10. What parables did Jesus tell, in chapter 13? What warning did Jesus give about not hindering the entrance to the kingdom and on forgiveness, in chapters 18 to 20? And then how will human history end, in chapters 24 and 25? Matthew even listed a set formula to signal the end of each of these blocks, where the cycle begins again. When Jesus had finished these sayings, In other words, that quote is kind of a signal that you're going to start this pattern over again. I thought it was so interesting. And then, of course, there's the verse references to each time that he says this when Jesus had finished these sayings or whatever. So that's what I have so far in my basic background information. And as far as just gathering this information and writing it down, you could do this in about 20 minutes. So now what I'm going to do is show you the process of how I compile all of this information and then kind of make it all neat and clean and orderly to put in my Bible. Okay, so I'm starting out in the ESV Study Bible. The ESV Study Bible is really good because it has a copious amount of general study notes. They range from historical context stuff to application, so a little bit of everything. Now, in this case, I'm looking for book background, so I'm in the Intro to Matthew in this. If you're using the Study Bible, also look at the table of contents in the articles for relevant stuff in the articles. But a study Bible or not, most Bibles have those intros where you can find lots of this kind of information. So check there first and foremost. I'm just writing all this down in a notebook for right now. I'm not worried about neatness or making this fit in my Bible or having it all in the right order right now. I'm just mining for information in lots of different sources. I end up writing all this stuff twice, which is okay for me. I don't mind doing that. But you could just choose as you go if that's how you want to do it. Next, I'm looking in the Cultural Background Study Bible, in the Intro to Matthew. It had a few unique things, but mostly the same as the ESV. Sometimes it has unique information and a lot of it, and sometimes it's not so much. Now, I have this Bible handbook. I got it at a church yard sale. I promise it's not a stolen library book. It has a surprising amount of information, and it has these Old Testament passages here that Matthew refers to kind of in a chart form. And so I definitely want to come back to that. But then it has a ton of in-text info that I want to come back to whenever I start the study proper. But there were a few like background nuggets that I found there. So now I have a good set of notes from a few different sources, and whether or not they end up in my Bible, I've learned a lot. And so far I've spent about 30 minutes, including the time I spent highlighting in my Bible and all of that stuff. Now, what I like to do, of course, is just sort of sloppy get this down on paper, and then I'm going to actually make a little fold out to go in my Bible that kind of makes this a little more concise and leaves a little bit of room for other stuff. Okay, so all I'm going to do is take a piece of dot grid paper, and I'm just going to cut it down to size here. All right, so now I have a nice little introduction sheet to the book of Matthew. And I have a little room to grow on both sides here. And feel like I'm more prepared to go ahead and dive into the book proper now. So let me know what you think. We'll be talking to you later. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.